So let's start by creating a new directory. I'll call this serverless container, and I'll cd into a serverless container and first open it in Visual Studio Code. You can use any code editor of your preference. And here I'll take the integrated terminal. So here in this demo, we are going to create an Express API and containerize it, and then we will serve it through the container. So before we create our Express API, let's initialize an Amplify project. I will do it, Amplify init, and hit enter. And by the way, you need the latest version of Amplify. So currently what I have is 4.41.0, and there's a new update as well. You can use this to install it. And after that, you need to configure it. I'll put the links in the description how to do that as well. So the project name, I'll just accept as it is. And dev environment is fine. Using VS Code, JavaScript, and we don't use a framework at the moment because this is the API. So I just click none. Now we need to create a directory to have our source. So for that, let's go ahead and create it src. And the default one is src. That's why I created a folder called src. Hit enter. For distribution file or the build file, we run another folder and we'll call it dist. And that is the default one here as well, as you can see. Hit enter. So the build command, for that to happen, we need a package.json file. So let me take another terminal while the other one is running, and I'll do an npm init here, -y. So I'll get a package.json file. Here we go. And I'll go back to the previous shell, this one. And here we go, we are here. So the build command is this, and start command, that's fine. Okay, so now it's creating our Amplify environment. And I'm going to be using a AWS profile. You can create a profile when you're configuring your Amplify. So the project is successfully created. Now we can go ahead and add resources. So as you can remember, we are using the second scenario where you will need an API gateway to call your containers. So you'll be tempted to do this, Amplify add API. And of course, we are going to do that. But before that, there's one additional step we need to do. So that is nothing but Amplify configure project. So why we do that? Now this is basically to tell this Amplify project is a container-based Amplify project. Usually when we create an API with Amplify add API, so it's going to create either API gateway or AppSync API, and the backend resources probably be Lambda functions and other serverless functions. But here our backend resources needs to be containers. So that's why we need to separately say this is a container-based project. So I will just accept the same name for the project, VS Code, JavaScript, and none. Okay, you have to accept the same thing. Now you might be wondering why we couldn't do this when we are initializing the project, and unfortunately that option is not available just yet. So this is the option I'm talking about. Now this prompt is not given to us when we are initializing the project, but it's only giving to us when we are configuring the project again. So it says, do you want to enable container-based deployment? So this time I'm going to say yes, I need that. So it will update our project. Okay, the new configurations are successfully made. Now what we can do is we can simply add the API, Amplify add API. So I can select whether I need a GraphQL or a REST API. I'll choose REST. And now we have different option. Earlier, the default option is API Gateway and Lambda, but now we have API Gateway plus AWS Fargate. This is container based. This is what we need. So I'll hit enter and I'll accept the default. Now I can use already pre-built templates. You know, there's Express.js template with the REST template and Flask template, or else you can create your own Docker file and Docker Compose file. So you can go ahead and check this template, but this time I'm going to use a custom mood. That means I'm going to create my own Docker file and own Docker Compose file, and I'll hit enter. Then it will ask me when do I want to deploy the containers. So I'm gonna go ahead and say on every Amplify push, I need to run the deployment pipeline. So I'll select that and hit enter. And I'm not going to restrict the API. And if you need to add Cognito and add some authorizations to your API, then you can go ahead and say yes. But in this case, I say no. So this is a public API. So now I can do amplify push. So it's going to go ahead and create that whole setup for me. By setup, I meant this whole architecture. You see, it's going to create the VPC, subnets, and although it's not a private subnet, I think they're creating public subnet. We'll verify that. And it's going to create the Ecs cluster for us. It's going to create an API gateway and set up the VPC link and also the cloud map for service discovery. It's not going to create, I believe, a Cognito because we have not made this as a restricted API, but the rest will be configured. So I'll go back here and I will continue it. Oh, it says there's no definition available. Our bad, because we couldn't create the Docker file or a Docker Compose file. So let's go ahead and do that. For that, I will go to Amplify folder here. Let me expand it a little bit. Then I'll go to backend and then I'll go inside the API folder. So right now I'm in the source folder. And inside this source folder, I will create the Docker file and also the Docker Compose file, YML. Yeah. All right. So next we need to add our Express API code. And I'll be using TypeScript here. For that, I will create two folders. The first one, let me call it app. And this is where my TypeScript code lies. And I'm going to create another folder. Let's call it lib. And this is where my compiled JavaScript code going to stay. Okay, now we need a tsconfig file. For that, I'm going to open this folder, this source folder, and I'll open it in integrated terminal. Okay, and if I ls it, then I see my Docker file, app and lib folder, and Docker Compose file. And here, I need another package.json file. So I'll do npm init-y, and it will create a package.json so I can install TypeScript. npm i --save dev TypeScript and hit enter. So that will install it as a dev dependency. If I just look at my package.json file now, and here we go. So it is installed as a dev dependency. Clear my screen, and then I'll use npx command, npx tsc --init to initialize a new TypeScript project. And here we go. Now we have a tsconfig file inside this source folder. Okay, so now let's set the target to, let's do it ES 2018. Common JS is right. Source map will enable it. And these two we need to configure, out directory and root directory. So our root or the TypeScript code will be inside app folder and the compiled JavaScript will be in the lib folder. Okay. And I'll also make sure the module resolution is node and the rest is fine. Okay, I'll save this. Okay, I'll close all these files and then I'll go to app folder. So this is where we write our TypeScript code and I'll just add app.ts file. Now we'll be using Express.js to create our API, so that let's install Express, npm i express. And then I will clear the screen. I'm going to install the types for Express and Node.js as well. Types/express and also types/Node.js. This could be dev dependencies. Okay, great. So if I go to package.json, I see these dependencies. So let's first, so now let's start creating our API. First and foremost, I will import Express from Express, and then I'll create Express app with Express. So let's create the root route now. I will do app.get, and if any request is made to this root route, I will just send the response as hello world. So I need to get the request and response variable, and I will, or parameters rather, rest.send hello world. And then let's listen to port 80. Console.log. Okay, this one got imported for some reason. Let me take that out. Cool. And we are going to enable cross for all the methods as well. So we can call this API from any domain. So let me paste this bunch of code. And here I'm using this as a middleware to allow all the cross-origin requests. And instead of hello world, I will rather say it hello from container, because this is running inside a container. So this looks good. Let me quickly test it locally. I will first compile this code to JavaScript. So TSC, hit enter. Then I should see my JavaScript code inside my lib folder. Here we go. And I'll go to my package.json file. Let's add a script. I'll call it serve. And I want to execute this app.js file inside the lib folder. So let's do node. Inside lib folder, you will find app.js file. Okay, node lib/app.js. So let's see if it works. So I'm at the source directory, as you can see. Then I'll do npm run serve. Okay, so it says listen to port 80. So let me take a browser and do localhost and hit enter. Here we go. Hello from container. So our application works. Now we need to Dockerize it. So in order to Dockerize, earlier we had Docker file and the Docker compose file. So let's go to the Docker file, and I will paste some instructions here. Save it. Now you can find the code in the description section. So essentially what it's going to do is it's going to use a Node.js image, Node 14.15, and we are using public ECR repository instead of Docker Hub. You can use Docker Hub as well, but since they released this public ECR recently, I'm using public ECR here. Then I'm setting the work directory as /app, and I'm going to first copy over the package.json file into this app folder inside the container, so we can make use of Docker caching. And then I will do npm install to install Express, really. And then I need to copy the code. So I don't want to copy the TypeScript code. I just need the compiled JavaScript code. So that's why I go inside the lib folder and then copy it over to this app folder inside the container. Then this is important. You need to expose 80, and this is a requirement for Amplify container deployment. So expose the port 80 or any port that you will run your container. And finally, we are going to run npm start. So we have not added that command yet in our package.json file. So let's go ahead and add that as well. Start. And here I can just say node app.js, because we copied over the content inside the lib folder into our container. So the context is inside the lib folder now. So I can just say node app.js. Okay, so this is going to create a Docker image for us, and then we can spin up Docker containers out of it. And for that, we'll be using a Docker compose file, because it is easy to compose containers with Docker compose file rather than using the Docker CLI. So let me copy over some code here, paste. So here in the first line, I specify the version. So this is Docker compose 3. However, Amplify recommends to use 3.8. You can use that too. And then I'm defining my services section. So my first service is the app. Here I need to specify where my Docker file is. So right now I'm editing the Docker compose file. The Docker file can be found right next to it in the same level. Then I will expose port 80 to outside, and that maps the port 80 in the container. So let's check this if it works locally. And to do that, you need to make sure you have Docker installed and running. Now to run our containers, I will use Docker Compose CLI. I will do docker compose up, and before that I need to build it. So I'll pass it as a flag dash dash build, and let's hit enter. So it will walk through the instructions in the Docker file, and it will pull the Node.js from public ECR repository and create the work directory app, copy over the packages and install the dependencies and all that. You can see the steps right here. So now it is running the npm install. It will copy the code, and finally it will run the command npm start. Now I should be able to access the same local host, and this time it's going to serve from inside the container. Here we go. So it works. So if I stop it, you can just verify that. So I just stopped the docker compose, or the container really, and if I now do that, I don't get anything. Okay, seems like our docker compose file and docker file is ready to deploy. So let me clear the screen now, and now let's do again amplify push. So it's going to deploy my API, and I will just say yes and hit enter. And this is going to take some time, guys, because it's going to configure and provision many resources behind the scene. And this architecture, to be exact, although it should be public subnet instead of private subnet. Let's verify that, by the way. Okay, guys, so the deployment is completed, and we have got a REST API endpoint, so we can access our API gateway. And let's check that out. I will copy this and let's access it from the browser itself. And here we go. I got the message from my container. Hello from container. Now guys, we only did amplify push, but amplify behind the scene has done quite a bit of things. Now that's why I took some time to explain it ahead of the time. And if I show you the diagram I have right now, so it went ahead and created the VPCs, subnets, and Ecs Cluster, ECS service, and also the API gateway, and it did the integration through a VPC link, and it also created the cloud map for service discovery. And although we didn't use Cognito here, it has done quite a bit of provisioning and configuration. I hope this is clear for you now. Now finally, before winding up this video, let me show you those resources that Amplify has configured. Now first I'll show you the network stack, that means the VPC and two subnets. So let me go to AWS console and go to VPC section. Now you can see this VPC, it's called amplify/VPC do not delete. So let me just copy the VPC ID, and let's go to subnet section. So there are multiple subnets. I will filter by that particular VPC. Okay, I'll click here, Amplify VPC. Then I should see the subnets. Now there are three subnets, and in the diagram I've showed only two subnets. So here there are three subnets. If I click onto one of that, and I'll go to the route table, and the route table associated to this subnet has an internet gateway attached to that. So that means this is a public subnet. So let's check the other two as well. So the second subnet, and this also has an internet gateway attached. So this is again a public subnet. Let me check the last one. And here in the route table section, so this one also has an internet gateway attached. So all three subnets are public subnets. So that is something to remember. Maybe in future they will add some options to choose whether those are private subnets or public subnets. But for now it's public subnet. So we looked at the VPC and two subnets, or rather three subnets. Then let's look at the ECS cluster that is inside this VPC. So I'll go to services and I'll search for ECS, Elastic Container Service, and open it in a new tab. Now this is our ECS cluster that Amplify configured. You can see it is Amplify dash, the name that we have given, serverless container dev, and some other information. And you can see this is a Fargate type. So it is a serverless compute. And if I go into this cluster, and let's see where the containers are spinned up. So here's our service. You can see we have this service. So that is this service here. So I'll click onto that. And in this service, Amplify has set the desired count to 1. So that means at any point of time, there should be at least one container running. Now here in the diagram, I have added 6, but instead now we have only one container. And out of that, one is already running. So let's check this. And if you go to the network access section in the service, you can see the VPC that is associated with this. Let's say that should be the Amplify VPC. I will open it a new tab. And here we go. So this is the Amplify VPC. So that's all good. And next, let me show you the API gateway. So I'll go to services again and search for API gateway. And here we go. Open it in a new tab. And this is that API Amplify dash serverless container. Now this API gateway is accessing our containers that is inside the VPC through the VPC link. So let me show you that. If I go to here, VPC link section, and I should see the VPC link that Amplify has created. So the API gateway can connect to our VPC through this VPC link. Next, how does API gateway know the IP address of this container? And that is thanks to the Cloud Map integration. Now the Cloud Map is a service discovery service, as I already explained earlier. And if I go to the integration section here, I can see the default route is pointing to the service discovery. So if I click onto this one, and you can see AWS Cloud Map service is here. Now here in the Cloud Map service, it is creating a namespace. Now let me show you that namespace. If I click edit here, yeah, these are the namespaces. If I click this drop down, here's the namespace that Amplify has created. So in our Ecs cluster, we will use this same namespace, and from our API gateway, then we will use this namespace as well. So what is this namespace really? So this namespace is being created by Ecs Cluster, the cluster that Amplify has created for us. So when it is creating the cluster, it has created the namespace in Cloud Map and associated this cluster with that namespace. So from our API gateway also, we will be accessing the same namespace. Thereby, Cloud Map will return the IP addresses and the port of the containers. So that's how it all happens. So the API gateway call to the Cloud Map, and in from the namespace it get the IP address and the port, and then through this VPC link it will connect to that container IP, and then it will get the response and send it to the users, and it will show the message from our container here when we access the API gateway URL. Now there's one other thing I want to share with you guys. When we are using this architecture, there's certain cost is involved. Now one reason why we use containers instead of Lambda function is to prevent cold start. And these containers will keep running all the time. So whether or not you use them, you have to pay for that uptime. So unlike Lambda, where you will be only charged for the Lambda execution time when the Lambda function is invoked, here you will be charged until this container is down. So I hope it is clear. You go here and maybe you might want to delete everything. So do amplify delete, and amplify delete the entire stack, including all the resources. Yes, and that's it. So make sure you do this if you are just testing this out. Otherwise, you will be charged. I hope this has been useful, and I'll see you in another video.